Hey.
You have to check yourself. Yeah, well, that's how I used to do sometimes.
Greetings, folks. It appears that it's about 6:31, and we do have the requisite number of board members, so I would like to call to order the 9th regular meeting of the Board of Directors of SCD 52, and if Yuri could lead us in the pledge. Thank you. Our first order of business would be to act on the minutes of January 6th. Any errors or omissions noted on those? If not, we accept those under general consent. That brings us to communications. Kim?
There are no communications this evening, Betsy.
Thank you. Brings us to adjustments to the agenda.
There are no adjustments to the agenda this evening.
No adjustments. Let's try committee reports. Finance, Yuri.
We did meet this evening. We reviewed AP and payroll warrants for December and early January. Everything with those looked on track. We also reviewed the November financials. As we mentioned last time, Mr. Flanagan did look into the transportation line, which looks like we're ahead of where we normally like to be. And what he found was one of the driving costs is we're forecasting that we'll be about 20% over on gasoline cost. And as everybody knows, that's due to the cost of gas and more usage. But other than that, everything in that line was right on track. So for over the year through the end of November, the financials are about 30% as we would expect.
Thank you. Brings us to PTB. Jessica?
We have not met.
Not met on that one. Curriculum policy. Joanne?
We did meet. We discussed several that are not necessary and several that are. Superintendent evaluation was one we discussed, and it's not necessary. It has to be done, but the policy isn't necessary. Interesting enough, fire drills are not a necessary policy. They have to happen, but they're not a necessary policy. And the same for bomb threats. Hopefully I'm doing this right, Teresa. I think these were all the
Bomb
ones
threats
that...
are required,
They
but those
are?
are the ones that we reviewed, yes.
Okay. And then we talked about the policy for food sales, but we're waiting for more information. Child find and progress through the grades are both required, but the regulations for progress through the grades are not required. And we discussed a news media policy that also is not required. And that was it.
Thank you. That brings us to student representative report. Tristan? And there's a cordless microphone right to your right if you feel like you need it. I'll warn you that I had such good luck with it last time that I switched to this one.
The recent production of the Alpha Junior musical at Ledbury High School last week proved to be a success and went well. In a similar vein, the operation of Winter Carnival this year is expected to function as usual or as close as we can get given the situation. The upcoming month of February. As we return to school and settle into the second semester, the mood of the student body is slightly tinted with lethargy. It's admittedly something I can somewhat relate to. That concludes the student representative report.
Thank you. That brings us to administrator report. Principals. We have a spirited game of rock, paper, scissors to decide who goes first.
All right, good evening. I'm Ryan Patriot. I'm the principal at Turner Primary School, and I'm pleased tonight to give you some updates regarding Turner Primary School. So our current enrollment, we have 273 students at Turner Primary School, 72 in our 4-year-old pre-K program, 71 in our kindergarten program, 65 in first grade, and 65 in second grade. Our average daily attendance for quarter 1 was 94%, and our average daily attendance for quarter 2, which just finished, is 93%. I'm pleased to celebrate that we had 97% participation at our parent-teacher conferences. And I'm sure you're aware that they shifted at the last moment to being virtual, but we still had amazing participation and we had a lot of great conversations. Parents were invited to choose to Zoom or to have those over the phone. And then some we had as IEP meetings as well. But it's always exciting to get to share the goals that we have for our students for the year with our families. And it's always exciting to share with our families the structure and routine of the school day. That's typically the part of the purpose of the fall parent-teacher conferences. Turner Primary School kicked off our 100 Days of Giving campaign with a Betty White Hat Day on behalf of the Greater Androscoggin Humane Society. And I want to thank the Leeds PTC for inviting us. Traditionally, for the 100th day of school, we support a local cause and we collect items, and then on the 100th day, typically we go to the cause and we present them with the donations we've collected. And so this year we're doing the Greater Androscoggin Humane Society, and the kickoff for that worked perfectly well because Betty White was an animal lover, so it worked out perfect. Turner Primary School continues to recognize students that exhibit our word of the month. The word for January is safe, and we intentionally picked that word in January because we hope to be able to go sledding around our campus, and so we reinforce what safe sledding looks like. Unfortunately, we do still have a lot of ice out on our playground, so we haven't been able to yet, but we are very excited eventually to be able to sled. Today, though, some of our slides were frozen over, and so we had some students who opted to help remove the ice so that the kids could slide down the slide. And I reinforced to them that that was a great example of being safe because they chose to use their recess time to help remove some ice so that we could all enjoy the slides. February is Dental Awareness Month, and we are excited that the University of New England dental program is going to be returning to TPS to present instruction on dental health to our students. We are allowing instructors in our buildings as long as they follow our safety protocols and if the purpose of those visits are to enrich or improve our instruction. So we're very excited about that. We continue to provide weekly guidance lessons to all of our students, and our days every day begin with a morning meeting. And I know you've heard from administrators before, but the morning meeting is an opportunity to start the day where students typically sit in some type of circle. They go over the schedule for the day. They share something exciting or interesting. They play a game, and then sometimes in the younger grades it kind of leads into calendar, which is, what's the day today, and what was the day yesterday, and what's the day tomorrow, and what's the weather like, and how many days of school have we had. So our mornings continue to start that way, and it's always a really positive way for our students to start the day. Our outlets are still continuing to work on their writing skills. I know I presented before that that's always an area that we're constantly striving to improve in. And really the big piece is being able to write a coherent story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. That's an area that we're still working and growing in. And so the teachers, we use a lot of mentor text to demonstrate and model coherent writing. We compose a lot of stories with our students and in front of them so that they can see models. And then our students get to spend their writing workshop every day composing and writing stories, revising them, editing them, and then eventually publishing them. So those are some of the ways that we are working to address that. And then our outlets are still working on reading grade level text accurately. And so that's really teaching those strategies and comprehension skills for our students. Our amazing team of teachers and support staff continue to review data and make adjustments to better meet the needs of our students. We did just have a workshop, a teacher in-service day, and part of that time was spent looking at the needs of our students at the end of Q2 and then identifying what steps we can take to support them. We do have interventionists, and we have an intervention program where we have staff who come into the classrooms and pull students for small chunks of time to review sight words, sounds, different segmenting and blending words and letters, and say butterfly, say it without fly, that kind of a thing. So we have that intervention system going to help support our students being able to read accurately. And that is pretty much Turner Primary School at a glance. Does anyone have any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Danielle Harris. I'm principal at Leeds Central School. Our current enrollment is 178 students. We have 15 pre-K, 18 kindergarten, 19 first graders, 23 second graders, 32 third graders, 17 fourth graders, 26 fifth graders, and 28 sixth graders. Our average daily attendance for first quarter was 94.5%. I do want to clarify, though, that average daily attendance takes only into account the unexcused and excused absences that are recorded in Power School. It does not take into account the students in quarantine, because those do not count as an absence. They actually count as an attendance day. Average daily attendance for second quarter was 94%. Our parent-teacher conference participation was 96%. Some of the celebrations that we have going on at Leeds Central School is that eSpark is one of the things that we got district-wide for all the elementary schools this year, and it's been very well received by our staff and students. Teachers are using it as an intervention to meet the needs of all the students, and they found it really user-friendly and highly engaging for the students. Even though our PTC has been unable to meet since the start of COVID, they're still supporting our staff and students at our school. In December, they had a Candy Graham fundraiser that raised over $800, and it was a great way to spread cheer around the school. They also put on a Lighten Up LCS event, first ever of its kind. On December 17th in the evening, we put out a bunch of blow-up decorations and holiday lights along the sidewalk, and many of the students and their families drove through the parking lot loop. They were dropping off donations of tissues to us, and we were giving them goodie bags from the PTC, and they got a chance to wave to Santa and Mrs. Claus. And that was a great way to have a holiday event with no contact between any of the volunteers or the participants. Another thing going on at Leeds is that we have a student PBIS team, and they're continuing to make our school a better place. They offer their input and share student concerns. They do our morning announcements. They put up our flags. They pass out bus notes and collect Eagle tickets every week. They also take the lead on designating one day a month for special dress-up days. So on January 28th, we're having Pajama Day. And February 14th, we'll have Valentine's Dress-Up Day. Everyone will wear red or pink or something Valentine's-ish. And we've saved Beach Day for March 31st because we'll be completely ready for the end of winter by then. Another thing is that recognizing the importance of social and emotional learning, our staff has completed a screener on each of our students. It's called the DESA Mini, and teachers use it to look for strengths and needs of their students in 8 different categories, which are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, goal-directed behavior, personal responsibility, decision-making, and optimistic thinking. And then after those results are tallied, there's specific lessons available to teach the children who present any lagging skills in any of those areas. Also, each classroom community at Leeds Central School is a safe place for students to learn and grow. And many of our teachers are trying out a resource called Choose Love for Schools. It's a no-cost, next-generation character social emotional development program. It's designed to teach students, educators, and staff how to choose love in any circumstance so that we're creating a safer and more connected school culture. It's aligned with the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, better known as CASEL, which is the model of standards for social emotional learning. And it also incorporates neuroscience and positive psychology to teach mindfulness, character, and emotional intelligence. So these essential life skills and tools make our students better learners. An area of growth that we're working on is that the staff and students are working very hard to help each student meet the grade level standards in reading. And one of the ways that we're addressing that area of growth is that we're working with our district literacy consultant and providing flexible grouping and reading in order to meet the needs of all students. So whether they're struggling to meet the grade level standards or exceeding the standards, we meet them where they're at and provide them the instruction that they need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Doug Parker, principal at Green Central School. Currently, our enrollment at Green is 336 students. We have 27 in pre-K, 36 in kinder, 34 in first grade, 38 in second, 55 in third grade, 45 in fourth, 49 in fifth grade, and rounding out at sixth grade, we have 39 students. Our average daily attendance for first quarter was 94.1%, and for second quarter, 93.3%. And again, as Dr. Harris just mentioned, those do not include students who are quarantining. Happy to report that our parent-teacher conferences, which were done virtually, we had a 95.6% attendance rate, and obviously parents had an option to either attend by phone or by Zoom, and we were pleased and surprised. A lot more than we thought chose the phone. And it was kind of, we ran into a little difficulty because all of a sudden we only have about a half dozen lines, and we went, we might have more conferences than lines. So that happened a little bit, but parents were very, very patient. Some called back a couple times. Other teachers just said, I'm hopping on my cell phone and we're taking care of business. So everybody was very, very flexible. So, and it ended up wonderfully. We got great reports about parent-teacher conferences. So as far as our celebrations, GCS constantly strives to create a safe and welcoming environment for all of our students. And as a staff, we've incorporated PBIS, positive behavioral interventions and supports. We've got a universal team that designs and implements our basic practices for all of our students. We acknowledge the behavior we expect and we want to see. And we do acknowledgement using our Golden Gator tickets, We reteach expectations as needed when students' behavior isn't following those expectations. Around social emotional learning, which is really, really important, especially as we go into this essentially third year of the pandemic. We've got incorporated morning meetings, as Dr. Patry mentioned earlier. They incorporate a greeting, a sharing, an activity, and a morning message, and that sort of moves right into the next parts of the day. Morning meeting practices strengthen connections and relationship skills, increase self-confidence by learning to speak with one another in a class. They promote social awareness and they encourage positive behavior toward others. So it's really, really an integral part of our practice at this time. Also, our school counselor, Jennifer Simmons, has been providing lessons focused on helping students with stress, calming their body, creating mindfulness, etc. Teachers and families have reported that the practices have been incorporated into real-life situations, showing that students move the practices from theory into application, and we even got some great feedback from a couple of families that during a really loud, stressful time, they looked over and one of their students was actually doing one of the exercises and kind of de-stressing in the moment. It was fantastic feedback. Throughout our building, too, we know the importance of showing gratitude in very creative ways. We have all hands on deck with staff. It's no surprise that staffing, due to a variety of issues during the pandemic, have been very, very challenging. So we have all hands on deck, and this is whoever can jump in to do a duty, does a duty. I was pleased to be able to do playground duty yesterday. Wasn't expecting it, should have brought boots, didn't, but we managed. It was an absolute blast to be out with the kids. A great example, this is a great example for students when they see the adults in the building jumping in to help one another. And even more importantly, within classrooms, we've got staff that we're jumping in constantly for instruction, for anything that is needed. Other exemplars, we had one class that adopted a cow and is incorporating math and then social studies into the development, seeing the impact of their class involvement on the group that owns the cow. Another teacher does a Thankful Thursday project with her class to essentially show gratitude. And this is shameless, and I was not expecting this, but I was actually the recipient of the Thankful Thursday Award for today. So this is from a kindergarten class. And they do a little vote and then take care of all of the descriptions. They get a list as a class, and then their teacher writes it out, well, just helps the kids, and then she does a little small translation underneath, because anybody that's ever tried to decipher or decode Kinder, it's a skill. And yeah, so if anybody is interested in seeing this, you can hear all about and I don't toot my own horn often, but this was a big deal for me. So this is going up in my office tomorrow, but I really needed to bring this and share it. Let's see, we also have monthly student recognition at Green Central School. We do an acknowledgement of different character traits, responsibility, teamwork, leadership, respect, perseverance, etc. Normally we would do that as an assembly. What we've switched to is an announcement once a month. We read the kids' names on the intercoms, they get a certificate, there's a big hoopla in the classroom, and it's absolutely fantastic. Mr. Drew, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Mr. Drew. Mr. Drew came to Green Central School right before winter vacation with an amazing collection of critics and his contagious enthusiasm. This gentleman is pro-animal. The kids were completely mesmerized. They were just into it. Checked out Madagascar hissing cockroaches. Yeah, I know, I see some of your eyes, I'm sorry. Tarantulas, tortoises, and he had an Argentine black and white tegu, which is a really, really large iguana-like lizard, just massive. So that was super engaging. The board probably remembers very recently you approved a fundraiser for Coins for Kentucky that we were donating to the Mayfield School District. Since you greenlit us for that, we had, no pun intended, I just realized I said that. Sorry. We had about 2.5 days to run this, and thanks to so many of our staff, we had collection buckets up in our parent drop-off and pickup area. In 2.5 days, we raised $1,005. all of which was donated to the Mayfield, Kentucky School District. So thank you again on behalf of our students at Green. Kids were just amazing. They were just bringing in change, donating, and helping us to organize and count. It was unbelievable. We'd like the community to please be on the lookout for information on one of our upcoming community food drives. And at Green, for an area of growth, we're always looking at ways where our students are in terms of their learning. And we are finding that at this time there's a greater range of where we find students as far as their learning, likely due to our experiences over the last couple of years. However, our staff is no doubt up to the challenge. We use creative methods in all areas, including adaptive flex grouping and reading to meet the needs of our kids. We look at our student data to help inform our instruction, creatively plan to meet each student where they are, and make adjustments to support our students as they move, and we're mindful of their required skills, their growth, and meeting their academic standards. One method, of course, that we're looking at to address student growth, in particular in the area of writing, we want to address that challenge by digging into the specific area. Teachers are collaborating, they're planning ways to encourage and foster an expanded interest in writing throughout our school by creating lessons that are truly engaging, practical, and interesting for the kids, and allowing them to apply the skills they learn into real-world or applied scenarios. So that's what is going on at Green. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Good evening, I'm Jana Mates, principal at Tripp Middle School. I was watching the middle school basketball game before I came over, and the referee at halftime said, "Are you the principal?" And I said, "I am the principal." And he said, "You look like a principal." I'm not sure how to take that, but I do know I'm finishing up my probationary period. So in addition to working really hard to fill the role, I also look like the role. I think that's important for you guys to know. Our enrollment right now is 285 students. Our average daily attendance is 93%. Parent-teacher conferences, we had 95% of our parents attending. A major highlight, honor roll, trimester 1, so we're on trimesters at the middle school. Trimester 1, we had 100 of our 285 students make honor roll or high honor roll, so that was pretty exciting. We've also remained open for in-person learning all year, and that has not been an easy challenge. Our winter sports season is in full action, and our student athletes continue to demonstrate perseverance and sportsmanship during a rocky season. We continue to celebrate each other at the middle school. We have a student of the month each month, and that student is picked by staff. We also have kindness counts winners each week, and those winners are picked by peers. One addition or change at the middle school this year is our crew block. It's the last half hour of each day. It's a non-academic time, and the focus is to strengthen relationships between staff and students with peers. We've worked really hard this year to make that just a fun time for students to wrap up each day. Some examples of some of the activities that we're doing: we have a lot of grade level competitions. When the weather was cooperating, they were sort of Survivor style. If you've seen Survivor, they kind of met out on the football field. A couple weeks ago, we had a trash to fashion runway show. We've been doing some escape rooms. Next week, crews are going to compete in a tiny house building contest. In addition, each Thursday, students also check and reflect on their grades and their house scores in Power School, so they can take some ownership over their own learning. And when parents say they don't know what's going on, we put it back on the student, because they do. Most recently, our students have been drafting and designing their own service learning projects, and those are ways to help make both our school and the community a better place, and I'm anxious for those to come into play and to be able to share some of those with you. This intentional focus on relationships has positively impacted the behavioral data at the middle school, and I'm really proud of that. It also contributes to TMS being a fun, positive place to be, and I think that's really important right now. Last, many think of this as a challenge, but I also think of it as a highlight at our school. As many know, it's been really, really challenging for students and staff, especially with the absences that are going on. But our staff go above and beyond to meet students where they're at, whether they're in person or learning. Our teachers are teaching, they're reteaching, they're posting work, they're sending work home, they're communicating with families as much as possible. Our nurse is amazing. She's testing staff and students in the building and oftentimes in the parking lot. Our nutrition staff are not only serving students in school, but they're packing lunches and sending them home for students who are working remotely. And many of our ed techs are tutoring students via Zoom to help them stay caught up. And so it definitely takes a village, and I am very, very proud that Tripp Middle School has an amazing village. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. We've got some highlights of some things that are going on here at the high school. It's interesting to hear my colleagues talk because many of the things that they talk about happening in their buildings are also happening here in terms of all hands on deck. When we need hands on deck, all hands are on deck supporting classrooms when somebody's out, or if we just need some additional support somewhere. So that was very good to hear. A number of things going well around Leavitt this fall. Our current enrollment is 572. That will likely be different as of tomorrow when we do our weekly report. It's first week of the second semester, so we've had some enrollment changes over the last few days. But it's right around 572. We have one of the things that's really gone well this fall has been our ability to get back into our advisor groups, into HPTs. That was something that was sorely missed last year when we weren't able to do that. And have that back in our schedule every day. It's a little bit shorter than it has been in the past, but it's there every day, and that's been good to help reestablish connections that were strained between the group and also between home and school. And I think that was reflected in our conferences in November. They were as well attended here as they were in the other buildings. We had a very high attendance rate with Zoom conferences. There were a few phone calls, but mostly through Zoom. So that was very good. Also this fall, we had a Jmg Career Fair. Angela Corchesney, our JMG teacher, pulled together a career fair in the gym, and the gym had, I can't remember, I think 17 or 18 career options for students to check out, and it was good to see our students interacting with colleges and employers, and they had very good conversations, so that was very well done and well attended. Holiday food drive, we had a great holiday food drive. I know Green's got one coming up, but we had, I think, I'm not even going to say because I'm not sure, but it was a lot of food, and I know that Mr. Galway and Mrs. Hartson were busily delivering it just before vacation, so that was great to help out some families in need this fall. Mr. Leposki is working on a community service project with his students in the shop. You don't notice it, but when you drive by the Turner Townhouse, there's a couple of replica buildings that are typically out there, the old creamery and the old replica of the old toll bridge up at Twin Bridges. They were a little weathered, to say the least, but they are now living in our shop for the winter. And Mr. Leposki is working with students to rehab those, and they'll be, they're almost done actually. He's made great progress. We'll be painting them soon. And they'll be back out in their new rehab spot come spring, so look forward to that. Additionally, the Leavitt trustees purchased half a dozen Mac desktop computers for us last year, and we have a Mac lab set up in one of our computer labs. And Marcia Martin has taken that on with digital photography. If you get an opportunity to walk down the hallway towards the cafeteria, it's covered with photos with the students that the students have done, demonstrating different aspects of photography. That's also being used by our video production students, and it's used quite a bit. So that's been a huge addition, great addition for us. Some things that we're working on. It's been mentioned here. One of our challenges that we're working through is working with students that are in school for a few days, or they're out and then they're back. But it's a challenge, but we're working through it. Additionally, we're working through some core instruction conversations. Differentiation within the classroom is one of those things. We had some opportunities for staff to get some ideas around that at our in-service day this week, in addition to some other techniques that were shared with their colleagues. Another big conversation that we're having here at the high school is a conversation around experiential learning and how we can increase opportunities for all students in that area. You're likely to hear more about that come budget time. I guess that's a couple weeks away. So, but that's something that we have been talking about for the last several weeks, or actually longer, but as a whole group in the last several weeks. Also, I just want to speak briefly about the supports that we have for students, and that runs from the classroom lesson level right up through more intense intervention. And the differentiation conversation that we're having is kind of the base of that. The staff members are working with students during their prep periods and when students have study halls, staying after school with them. We also have 4 days where students can stay after school to get support: Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And that ranges from just a quiet place to get work done to actually getting academic support in particular areas. What's the other one? Oh, and then the next level would be the opportunity to come in on February vacation if you need a little extra time. And Mr. Galway started talking about setting that up today, so it must be almost February. But that's where we're at with that, and with that I'm going to wrap it up, unless anybody has any questions for me. Crystal?
Excuse me. I have a question, sort of, you've all touched on it, in talking about helping kids who might need a little bit more support. And I haven't heard anything like on a national level even, so certainly probably not here, but like where are we, and this isn't, don't answer it now, it can be another time, but just more like, I feel like when everything first started, everybody was kind of like, oh, I think everybody's kind of back a grade. Are we back on track, like with our kids, or do we still have like a big population of kids that are lagging? Do we have enough resources in place? You guys have all mentioned stuff. So like, obviously it's present. And walking into budget season, like you just said, hopefully, if we need more resources, we can get them. But I was just kind of wondering where we might be at with all of our, maybe even just like the youngers, reading, that sort of thing. And if we're meeting our benchmarks as district, state, nationally, where we rank. And I know NWEAs were just happening, so that might not be something that anybody can answer right now.
It would be hard for me to answer. I can give you anecdotal information at best,
Right.
but I will be able to soon, though.
Okay, yeah, it's just a global view.
So,
I just echo Crystal's question. Certainly, as we get to that point where we can have that discussion as its own freestanding discussion, I think everybody would be pretty interested to hear where we're at. Obviously, we're responding to needs as we identify them, but definitely would be interested in hearing more about that, and certainly applaud everybody doing, I was going to say a little bit of everything, but it's probably a lot of everything, and continuing to pitch in and work together as a community. So thank you for that dedication that you all are modeling, and we're fortunate enough to have staffs that are right on board with that around the community. So thank you. Jessica.
Do we have a way of tracking what our attendance rate is with the quarantine? I know that we've talked about what it is without it, but do we have a tracking measure for that?
We can look at the JC
And
pull.
I'm not sure whether everybody can hear at this point.
Oh,
We
sorry.
should probably get
I
a
was
microphone down on that
asking if
end.
we had a way of tracking what our attendance rates are, including the quarantine children versus excluding.
Yes, we should be able to pull that for next meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll turn it over to Kim for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Betsy. So at the January 6th meeting, I had told you that there had been some changes to the Maine CDC standard operating procedures, and that we were expecting further changes and further clarification. On Tuesday afternoon of this week, we did get a DOE priority notice that is providing some clarifying information on those changes. Our next step will be for me to meet with our school nurses and our principal team to review all of that information and determine what that's going to mean in terms of practices in our schools, and then I'll be putting out information about that to all of our community members. So talking about positive cases in schools right now, at Green Central School we have 7, at Leeds Central School 2, at Turner Primary School we have 14, at Turner Elementary School we have 11, at Tripp Middle School we have 4, and at the high school we have 22. Currently, between 45 and 49% of eligible students in MSAD 52 are vaccinated, so a little fewer than half of our students are vaccinated. The vaccination rate for everyone eligible in green is 63%. For everyone eligible in Leeds, 62%. And for everyone eligible in Turner, 65%. Community transmission rate remains high. And you probably, if you've been listening to the news or watching the news, you've heard Dr. Shaw talking about the backlog of positive cases that there are. So we know that there were over 1,500 between January 6 and January 18 in the state of Maine, and that in Androscoggin County alone, there were 974 cases, but as Dr. Shaw said, that's how many cases they were able to get through so far. So that's not a number that's set in stone. We do know that the latest data is that there are 412 hospitalizations with COVID, with 101 people in the ICU and 52 on ventilators. On January 6th, the board voted to send a survey related to masking to families and staff. We will discuss the survey and what it would mean if a decision were made to make masking optional under tonight's agenda item 9.2. I've shared with the board and our community several times this fall and this year that our teachers and ed techs are in desperate need of more planning time, as they are teaching the students in front of them 5 days a week, while also creating lessons and providing support and helping those students who are out in quarantine and who are sick to catch back up once they are back in school. Collaborative work with principals and with the TTEA, the teacher union, has resulted in some ideas to support teachers and ed techs with some additional planning time this year. I will be proposing a partial solution to the board under tonight's agenda item 9.5. And I say partial because I surveyed teachers and ed techs, and they have some ideas that we'll want to discuss as well. As you have heard a number of times, we do not have enough subs, and teachers and staff are constantly being pulled from their own duties and prep periods to cover for staff who are out. We need more subs. I'll use a desperate word again. And I really appreciate the board's willingness to look at, discuss the rate of pay for subs this evening. We have received the ED 279, and that tells us what our state subsidy will be for next year, for FY23. Now, they are subject to change over the next few months, but the initial ED 279 reflects an increase in state subsidy over last year, a good increase. On February 17th, I will present an overview of the proposed FY23 budget, and our administrators will present their executive summaries as well, and I will share more information about the ED 279 and our state subsidy at that time. But it looks hopeful, which is wonderful.
Thank you. That brings us to public comment. If we have folks that are interested in commenting, I'm not going to read the whole policy since I'm certain that at this point I sound a little bit like the teacher on the peanuts with the wah, 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 wah. And I just remind folks that the intent of this is to allow a fair and adequate opportunity for the public to be heard while ensuring that the time allowed for public discussion does not interfere with the fulfillment of the scheduled agenda. We will be limiting comments from any individual speaker to 5 minutes. And a reminder to everyone to identify yourselves when you come to the podium, and that speakers are not permitted to share gossip, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. Any questions or comments should be directed to me as the chair, and we'll move along from there. So we are ready to get started.
Good evening. I'm Steve McCoy. I am here again to speak about the air system. There's a question that I've been repetitively asking about how many bids or proposals were received. It has not been answered. And I have reviewed tape from the past meetings and gone through my own personal notes, which I take pages of notes. So I'm looking at the website for MSAD 52. Maine law requires that the board competitively bid school buildings, construction, additions, and/or repairs over $100,000. There was almost $250,000 spent on the air system. I do not see where the bids have come out. I have not been answered how many bids were even asked for. And the only response that I have at this point is that we're following the federal procurement. So I have read that entirely about 5 times. And basically what it does is it diverts back to and states the same state law that I just read to you, that anything over $100,000 needs to be sent out for bid. I have been wondering why that I haven't been answered a simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 20 bids, or whatever it happens to be. And it's a little frustrating that we spend that kind of money on an air system. We send out a letter that says it's going to help with a virus. There's no white papers on this system. Haven't seen any. I do know where to look for them. I can show you white papers for many other systems. I also reminded everybody back in, I think, approximately October, that there was litigation going on all across the United States for air systems that were being sold without any FDA compliance, any CDC compliance. So in other words, you could have spent that money and gone and sold a bunch of fans with some towels hanging in the back of them. I have a report that's on me right now from a recent school system that did a federally compliant test and tested and swabbed surfaces, tested the air with the same system that this school installed, and the test results show that it did absolutely nothing. This is a good opportunity for you guys to take advantage of an independent company coming in, doing some testing, showing you the results, you getting your money back and purchasing something that works, or if you want to use it for some emergency standard, sounds like right now, emergency is you guys need some staff. So maybe you get them the money they need, so we've got some people in here, because apparently the air system isn't going to be working. The masks aren't either. So, good night.
My name is Crystal Nicholas from Green. I'd like to read some excerpts from the student handbook, some definitions, and a comment or two. So the following excerpts are from the student handbook section JICIA, Weapons, Violence, Bullying, and School Safety. Prohibited conduct, Part B, use of any object, although not necessarily designed to be a weapon, to inflict bodily harm and/or threaten, intimidate, coerce, harass, or bully another person. Part G, bullying behavior that, number 1, places a student in reasonable fear of physical harm and disrupts the instructional program. Number 2, is so severe that it creates a hostile educational environment for the students who are bullied. And Part J, any other conduct that may be harmful to persons or property. Beyond the handbook, please consider that bullying is a distinctive pattern of repeatedly and deliberately harming and humiliating others, specifically those who are smaller, weaker, or dependent. Bullying is defined as the abuse and/or mistreatment of someone vulnerable by someone stronger and more powerful. This unwelcome behavior is long linked to power imbalances, where the victim appeals for protection to the very apparatus that is administering the abuse. Bullies tell their victims that this abuse is for your own good. The abuser always knows what is best for you, not your family or your friends or your parents, and certainly not you. Abusers demean their victims to damage their self-esteem and manipulate their thought process, as victims no longer feel that they know even fundamental truths. One such truth as the requirement of fresh, clean air to supply our body's cells, our children needing more oxygen per pound of body weight than we adults do. Repeated incidents of slow suffocation is reportedly an abuser's tool of choice. Those who enjoy torturing others can prolong their victim's suffering and watch it play out over time. This allows not only for extended excitement on the abuser's part, but also low incidence of detection. What is harder to see but that which is hiding in plain sight? Abusers favor methods that de-incentivize reporting. They leverage their power over one set of victims so that those in the first set, let's say we parents, are manipulated into abusing, masking our own children. Yes, we as parents are in an abusive relationship where if we want that free education for our children, we must become the abusers and affix the asphyxiating device upon them ourselves. See how horribly clever that is? And who are these abusers? Why, they're all around us, but they're not coercing us. It's for your own good. It's for everyone's safety. You don't need to breathe, so selfish. You and your children need to take one for the team. We can do this. But don't worry, your protestations about actual safety, so tiresome, your concerns will never be addressed or answered. Trust the experts. They're experts at bullying.
Jimmy Childs from Leeds. I want to thank all the educators and principals and everybody for doing stuff for our kids. Did anybody see the CDC director, Walensky, last week on TV? Said that the numbers are off. Jake Tapper said by 40%. Right-wing news says 60, so let's just cut it in half, meet in the middle, to 50% off. So every number that Ms. Brandt gave earlier, you can cut that in half by 50%. And I mean, that's a fact. 0 deaths in Maine, January 18th, I think it was. It was 0 deaths. So 0 deaths by 50%, cut that in half, that's even less than 0. You know, these are real numbers. You know, those are real numbers. Parents from Michigan want to sue for quarantining healthy kids because by definition, our constitutional right is to free and fair public education. So when you quarantine healthy kids, you're actually taking that away. They did it to her kid 3 times. The 3rd time, they won it in court. So like I said, the court, there's a lot of stuff going on in courts, and eventually it's going to trickle down. You know, so in the OSHA mandate, the OSHA vaccine thing that was struck down by the courts, they wrote OSHA is only empowered to set workplace safety standards. It's not a broad public health measure. Educational. You guys are all here for educational and financial stuff. There's nothing in public health measures that allow you to take our bodily autonomy away from our kids. Bodily autonomy, courts, they've been beating it in courts for a Abortion, that's how they get it for abortion. A woman can rip a baby from her kid because it's her bodily autonomy. People can change it.
Let's stick to
No,
school-based.
it
Let's
is.
stick to school-based
It is school, okay.
items
Gotcha.
for discussion.
Okay,
Thank
the
you.
ESSER bill, did our school take any money from the ESSER bill fund? Because that was $125 billion that came with stipulations that you have to do what they say, which is like masking stuff. Says, even in an emergency situation, government agencies involved must take a proactive role in the full implementation of informed consent without the intervention of any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or other ulterior form of constraint or coercion. So I would like some informed consent on the safety, the safetiness of the masks. You know, so maybe I can get some of that. And I have a question is, now, are you required, Ms. Bollier, are you required or any of the board members to obtain a security bond from a security bond company? Or is that provided through the school?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, every person that takes an oath or gets into a position like a superintendent has a security bond. It's a surety bond, I'm sorry, a surety bond. Liability and fidelity clause. It's in your surety liability insurance for the surety bond. So is that something, maybe I could get some information at a later date on that?
Certainly the school has various liability insurances that do cover.
Right. Right, so, because each person has a right to file a claim against an appointed official or on their bond. You know, so the fact that there's problems with the masking, there's adverse effects and whatnot, and we've been telling you this forever. Even the left-wing news is admitting it. The CDC director says the numbers are only by 40%, they're 40% off, and we're still going by all these numbers. And I've asked, you know, the policy committee to look into stuff. I've given, you know, information to look into, get back to us, to maybe tell us your reasons why you think they should wear the mask, besides like, oh, these professionals say so. You know, give us some information on what you found, you know, on why you want to do that, you know. The News Nation was out, and Dr. Fauci's 70% disapproval rating. The CDC and the FDA, 51% of Americans disapprove and don't on the COVID information.
We're at 5 minutes.
The president himself, 85% disapproval. So, I mean, it's just, you know, there's a lot of inaccurate stuff coming in. I just want you guys to do what's right for the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak?
Anthony Shostak, Green. Since time immemorial, human adults have taught their children and striven to protect them from harm, even if it meant sacrificing themselves in the process. Life requires adults to be brave, to be selfless, and, whenever possible, to use our intellect to allow us to grow old while protecting and teaching the younger generations. In doing so, the human race has so far risen to great heights. But what a change these past couple of years. Rather than responding to COVID rationally, too many have done so emotionally, reacting out of fear. And in doing so, we have taught our children a lesson. We've taught them that public health policy should be determined by politics, hubris, professional ambition, greed, lies, and fear. We have taught them to spurn data that doesn't agree with propaganda. We have taught them to engage in ad hominem attacks on anyone who questions the policy. We have taught them to divide society into tribes of masked and vaccinated us and the unclean them, and to use the pariahs as scapegoats for the failure of policies to contain the spread of the virus. We have taught our children that they themselves are dirty, dangerous vectors of invisible pathogens that could kill their grandmother or their best friend, regardless of the fact that they are the least likely to spread the disease to anyone. We've shut them behind masks, stealing from them the simple pleasures of seeing a friend smile. And our mask policies are implicated in what is now acknowledged to be a mental health crisis among young people. This should make us ashamed, but it seems instead some wear this as an unwholesome badge of honor. But the lies are beginning to unravel. States with more honest leaders and surgeons general than ours have already pulled back mask mandates, putting individuals back in control of their lives, and their states are thriving. Even European countries known for a much more top-down approach to governance have done so. And even now, England has said that there will be no more mask mandates, no vaccine papers, no masks required anywhere in the country, period. We have put up with this for too long. You have no science to back up your mask policy, only the dubious authority of the agencies who have lied to us all from day one of this sad affair, and they have lied. They have lied about the origins of the disease, they have lied about their role in it, they lied about the efficacy of masks repeatedly, and they lied about the efficacy and safety of vaccines. They lied about the treatments that could have saved hundreds of thousands of lives, and they lied about how dangerous the disease is, especially with regard to children. And they still lie about these, despite the fact that the layers of their deception are being pulled back every day. You school officials were hired and elected to be leaders. But instead of leadership, I see only a sheepish willingness to follow orders and unquestionably accept recommendations from untrustworthy sources, people who have squandered the public trust. We need people who know how and when to question orders that diminish the learning environment of our schools, that violate the authority of parents, and psychologically torture our children. It is time for this madness to end.
Anyone else wishing to speak? If not, thank you. That brings us to old business, which we do not have any of. Moving on to the consent agenda, I would entertain a motion for the list. Yuri, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Crystal?
Yep.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Moving on to new business. For item 9.1, we have Mr. Steve Bailey with us this evening from Maine School Management, and Mr. Bailey is going to walk us through the various services that Maine School Management offers in supporting districts in their search for exceptional educational leaders to fill the role of superintendent. Board members have folders up here describing in glossy details some of those services. And Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here this evening. Steve Bailey, I'm the Executive Director of the Maine School Management Association, as well as the Executive Director of the Maine School Boards Association. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Maine School Management Association, who does offer this service to school boards as they embark upon the, I would say, unfortunate search of trying to find a new superintendent. Personal statement. And it is the important duty, though, of school boards. It's probably one of your most important duties to hire a superintendent. And so doing the search and an effective search for a new superintendent is a very important task that you as a school board should be doing. So what we have tonight in front of you, Maine School Management Association does provide what I will call a menu of services that can be chosen by you. You could use Maine School Management or not. We do provide this as a service to you. It is a fee for service. And there are different aspects of the search that do require and request a certain amount of funds to be able to be spent by the district to be able to have this happen. What I will say that any search, whether it's conducted by us or another firm or just by yourself, I would say it would take an estimate of 12 to 14 weeks from the time that you first put your ad out until you make a decision as to who you might hire or recommend for hire for your next position as superintendent. There are 3 different pieces of information there. The first one I would just indicate to you, and it's probably for your reading later on, it's the technical proposal. It's the thicker packet. It provides information as to who we are as well as to what we do. I serve as the executive director. Eileen King is the deputy executive director of Maine School Management Association. She also helps districts perform searches, and we have both Charlotte Bates as well as Vicki Wallach who help in this particular capacity, and a very adept administrative assistant, Angie Adet, who helps in this particular process. So we have a number of people both available and helpful. And in the back of that packet, we also have a demonstrated list of districts that we have helped, as well as the number of searches that we've participated in helped districts over the past several years. The other 2 brochures, the smaller one, I would have you look at first and open up to the middle. You'll see that we identify 5 different phases for a successful superintendent search. And first of all, you need to decide whether or not you do wish to seek a consultant such as MSMA to be able to help you in the process, selection process. You also want to identify, since you do have an outgoing superintendent who's retiring, whether or not you want her help in this particular process and how much help she can provide you. Do you want other people from the community, from the staff, to also be involved in this particular search? And if so, how would you go about selecting them? So those are all different kinds of things that you would want to consider in terms of before you engage on the 5 different phases of the search process itself. We like to engage with the school board as well as the community in terms of determining, is there a leadership profile that you would like to see created for the person that you want to come in and replace your current superintendent. So there are different things that you would take a look at with regard to that, whether or not you would engage the community in a survey or any type of listening sessions, talk with the staff, talk with administrators, to be able to identify, okay, you've had a particular approach over these last several years. Is this something that you want to see continued? Is there a change of direction that you'd like to see perhaps go? And how can that be developed and identified by you as a community, by you as a school board? So you develop that leadership profile, and that would be very important in terms of the very first part of the search. Connected to that is making sure that you as a board take a look at the job description. Is that up to date in terms of where you think you want to be going, not only for today, but also for the next 5 or 10 years? There's an important aspect, too, of as you get into the recruitment area, of thinking about salary and benefits, because as you want to also continue to be competitive with neighbors around you, are you gathering the type of salary and benefit data that would be beneficial for you to be able to know what kind of package you could be able to provide for the next person coming into this particular position? So that's all part of phase 1. Developing the ad that you would want to be posted and identifying where you want to post it, that's also part of that phase 1. You get into phase 2, which is where you actually would go ahead and then begin to advertise. We have started to use national advertisements as well as local. We use Serving Schools as well as School Spring. We also advertise through the American Association of School Administrators website, which puts your search out nationally as well as just in Maine. We utilize your website, we utilize our website, and try to make the position a very attractive, position for people to want to come and work within your school district. In the development of those ads, we work with you to be able to try to identify certain aspects of your community and of your school, to be able to make sure folks are looking at the positive aspects of why they would want to seek you as a school district. And part of that recruitment effort is the beginning process of a candidate looking at you and identifying whether or not they want to come here, as well as the process of you beginning to take a look at them to see, do you want to interview them, do you want to have them come be a candidate, within the selection process. So that's all part of that candidate recruitment phase 2. The candidate screening, we could help you, or you could do this yourself. We often would have our applications be sent to us. We also have had districts who have had the applications come to them, and then they would organize them and get them ready for the screening of the applications and the determination of who you actually would like to have come and be interviewed. That is something that Maine School Management does, but also, as I said, individual districts do. If we were to do it, one of the things that we have found to be very successful, especially in this time of difficulty of having people come together, we typically have scanned the applications, made them available in a private Dropbox site where you could individually and within your home be able to screen the applications and be able to do the determination of who you actually would want to come and be interviewed. Part of the process right from the beginning, I need to circle back a little bit, where you do have a 9-member board, is to identify who you actually would want to have on the selection committee. Is it all 9 people on the school board? Is it a subset of the school board with other people involved in that initial selection process? But one very, very important thing to make known to everybody, including board members yourself, is it is the school board, yourself and only you, who has the authority and responsibility of hiring the superintendent. So even if you had other people on the search committee or on the screening committee, they would be making a recommendation to the full school board, who then would have the responsibility as well as authority to be able to interview those finalist candidates and make the decision as to who would be the next superintendent. Only the board has that authority as well as responsibility. That's given to you by state statute. So you get to the end, and you identify through interviews who your finalist candidates would be. The board would interview those finalists, and we would help notify the people that were not interviewed. We would help with the selection and setup of candidates for you to be able to go through the process of interviews, and then we would help in the identification, notification of people both who were not selected as well as who would be selected. We can help you in terms of both structuring a contract and or working with you to be able to, like I said before, make sure the job description is what it needed to be, and then also work with you to be able to set yourself up for positive onboarding as well as transition, because it's one thing to be able to hire and select a person to come in as your next superintendent. It's another thing to have a very successful transition period so that it's not just turning over the keys to the individual, but also helping them be successful. You will have invested a great deal of time in this particular process. You want it to be successful, not only for the hire, but you want it to be successful for the person's first few years in terms of having a successful experience coming into the district. So that's a quick overview of what the search process would be like. If you take a look, if you would, at the cost proposal, which is the thinner packet, I can have you turn to page 3 of that cost proposal, and you see we generally break down our search services into a series of steps. The first one would be the planning step, and this is where we would conduct workshops with you. One being a confidentiality workshop, which would be for the entire board as well as for the search committee. That confidentiality workshop is extremely important because anything and everything about the application process, about the applicant, about the materials, and about conversations about who's applied is confidential, and the person coming in making application to you and to the district needs to know that their information will be kept private. That's your responsibility to do that, and they are coming in with the understanding that that's what will happen with them and for them. So we do that confidentiality training. We also combine that with a non-discrimination training, making sure you're aware of your own policies with regard to non-discrimination, as well as the federal and state laws that apply with regard to the hiring process. So we would combine that with a confidentiality training. We also would include a short piece of that workshop would be involved in interrupting bias in the hiring process, because all of us, as we come together in a hiring situations, candidate selection process, we bring our own individual biases into this particular arena. And so it's important to be able to understand and be able to identify what your own individual biases are, and be able to see if we can interrupt them in the hiring process to make sure you're being fair and equitable to each and every candidate that comes to you, both in the written application form as well as within the interviews that you might be bringing them into. The next piece is whether or not, this is something you would need to decide, whether you would want to have any in-person forums. And we have conducted forums before. Most of those were pre-pandemic. And so we have really more gone to surveys and or remote listening sessions where we would invite people to participate within a listening session, trying to identify the types of qualities and characteristics of the next superintendent you would like to have come into the district, as well as identifying strengths and challenges that you feel are present within the district. That helps in the development of your screening application tool that you would use, as well as within question development that you would want to have available within the interview process. So there are 3 different things that we have at the top of that page: forums, a listening session, or surveys that we can use to be able to gather information from the community and from staff to be able to identify the kind of qualities and characteristics that you would identify for the next position, next person in the position. Advertising and recruitment is a big area. You want to try to cast as wide a net as possible, as well as make sure that the ad that you do develop and that we're able to broadcast for you is one that's going to attract attention. I will tell you that we already are engaged in 9 different searches this year. 2 of them are for directors of CTE programs. The other 7 are for superintendencies. I will tell you that you have an attractive superintendency here, partly because of the size of the district, the compactness of the district, as well as the offerings and the programs that you have here at your district. So I do think location also is another attractive feature for you. So you're within range of a couple of metropolitan areas, suburban areas in terms of where you have access to services. And so your people would be looking at that in terms of coming to this particular position. So advertisement and recruitment is another piece, and you can see what some of those services are for us to be able to provide those for you. I've talked a little bit about the application process. We would help develop an application, custom application for you. It's pretty well stocked, but we would at the same time identify whether or not you would have some personal narrative statements that you would want to have included within the application. Those narrative statements give you a little bit of insights in terms of how candidates might approach specific issues you would want to have asked and answered within the application process. I did mention that the most beneficial way that we found to be able to have screening committees review the applications is through a redacted scanned application that you'd be able to do within the privacy of your home. We also do make the applications available to you if you prefer to have them in paper form. We could bring them to you. You could have them in the superintendent's office, and people on the screening committee could come to superintendent's office. And again, because they need to be confidential, they would need to be in a private setting, and you could screen the applications within that particular setting as well. The next part of the process is the interview process. One of the workshops that we host with you is to try to help you identify if you will have an application screening rubric, also what the questions will be for you to use within the interviews, as well as if you have, and the type of interview rubric that you might develop and design for helping identify the conversation you want to have about the applicants after the interview process has been completed. We would help work in that particular area, and then we also would help in the notification of candidates to make sure that that's something that's done for you, and you don't have to worry about that in terms of being able to go about your business and help having us to be able to conduct that type of the work for you. And then you get to the end. I mean, the happy part is being able to both make a decision as well as to be able to offer the position, to a selected candidate, and hopefully have them agree to come be your next superintendent. So with that, it's a pretty straightforward process. Like I say, we've done it many, many times successfully. We also, as I said before, it does take about 12 to 14 weeks. If you were to decide to go with MSMA and want some of our services, it'd be best for me to come back and perhaps within a workshop session identifying, or over the phone, that can happen as well, of being able to identify, what it is that you want for services. If you were to go ahead and decide to have MSMA help you, it would be best for me to be able to have a contact person, be it Betsy or someone else who'd be the head of the search committee, so that decisions could be made so that we could continue to work to go forward. We're already at January 20th, and like I said, there are several searches that are already out a little bit in front of you. At the same time, we're in a very good window of making sure that we get the advertisement out in time to be able to attract a very good pool for your position. So with that, I guess I would open it up for questions if you have any. Be able to respond either now, or you can talk about this later, Betsy, and call me back as well.
Thank you, Steve. And I guess I just share with board members as we're mulling this over and looking at next steps. When I think back to the last, and I'm looking at Mr. Shaw because I'm sure he'll remember better than my recollection. Our last 3 superintendent hiring processes, we've done 3 slightly different things each time we've gone. We've had some processes where we've done everything in-house. We've had some where we utilized some of MSMA's services throughout, and well, that kind of covers it. It was either some or none. That's probably as much detail as is absolutely necessary at this point. And I just remind folks that obviously all 3 of those were done not in pandemic conditions either. So as far as our staffing and ability to do some of those things, I think I would remind everyone that a couple of the things that Steve shared are extremely important. Ultimately, the decision lies with the board and the board alone in hiring a superintendent. It's actually sort of our one big responsibility as a board from a legal standpoint. And a couple things that have been very helpful in the process in times past have been inclusion of folks on those initial screening committees. We've had absolutely dedicated folks who've put in lots of time in that screening committee and lots of really candid feedback, and I think that's improved our outcome significantly. Everything from pretty outstanding students that Mr. Shaw has hunted down at the high school to staff and folks all throughout that have been, as I said, dedicated to the process. So I certainly want to make sure that that's top of mind for folks as well. This is a lot for everyone to consider, and to consider what the time frame looks like, but as Mr. Bailey indicated, not that we need one more thing that everybody feels pressure over, but the clock is actually ticking, so we need to move forward on this. We have a couple of options. We can talk about any action the board would like to make this evening as far as utilizing or not utilizing MSMA's services, or we could circle back around to our first February meeting and plan to make some sort of decision there. And if folks have follow-up questions, information that you would like to be hunted down between now and then, that's certainly a good thing as well. Thoughts from board members?
Just worried
Crystal.
about the timeline. Just as Mr. Bailey said, clock is definitely ticking. And this will be the first time that I have sat for this, so I don't know the process, and this outline is great. And I guess, do we wait until February 1st to make a decision about this when there are more board members? I don't know.
Those are great questions.
Sorry. So that's just what's going on up here. Sorry.
Thank you. Jessica?
So obviously we haven't budgeted for this.
That too.
Do we wait until we set our new budget? I mean, we obviously can't wait until it's in place. But I guess I'm confused about where we find the funds to do this, if we should choose to go this route.
Maybe Dean could speak to, I caught my eye there for a moment, about how we would fund something like this, that we have certainly the ability to do that. I didn't mean to create like dueling bantos at the microphone there, but that's...
Yes, and so it is important enough that we'll identify the funds to do so, and obviously based on an estimate, and get that process rolling sooner than later.
Thank you. So the board would have the ability to say, for example, engage the services of MSMA not to exceed, to do several items not to exceed a certain dollar figure kind of thing. If that might be something that we could discuss as far as moving forward in the process and not placing all of our decisions in February.
Yeah, that is correct. You have that authority.
Crystal?
And am I right in assuming that this is like a menu process, like you can select certain things? Okay.
Yes, it is, so that we would be very willing to do the whole thing. We'd be very willing to do anything that you figure that you can't do in-house yourself. One of the things that I might suggest between now and your next meeting, that perhaps the chair and I would be able to have a chance on maybe having a conversation about certain things that might be suggested that she might then bring back to you at your February meeting. In the meantime, I can prepare a timeline for her that would demonstrate in terms of what the steps would be based on a early February meeting decision. So that we could, if you did decide to go that route that night, we'd be ready to take the next step, very quickly right after that.
Thank you. Does that sound acceptable to board members? That we'll have that as an agenda discussion, and that Mr. Bailey and I will have the opportunity to discuss, and I think have some specific menu items perhaps that we've discussed a little bit more in depth than just the entire menu that folks have to take a look at. Jessica?
Would you be able to include Dean in that process so that he could come out with some information on where to might be?
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. That way we could have all that presented to the full board.
So unless there's any objection from board members to that sort of process, we will talk about this further with the intention of making a decision as to what that timeline and process look like with additional details for our first February meeting.
What's the date of that? February 3rd.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us this evening and for sharing lots of information. Much appreciated. That brings us to Item 9.2, discussion of survey related to district's current universal masking. Kim? So what Kim's passing out currently is the same communication that went out to everyone in the district earlier today, so that everybody knows what we're up to as a follow-up to our last meeting, and hopefully to try to kill a couple birds with one stone. There were some questions around what's the comparison. I think there was a specific question of so what does it look like if we had masks or if we don't have masks. So certainly there was an attempt made in this to give kind of a side-by-side comparison sort of piece so folks have a sense. And obviously this has been a rather rapidly evolving world here over the last 2 weeks, just to make things a little more exciting, because we all needed a little more excitement. Kim?
Yes, Betsy. So in the last board meeting, when the board voted to develop a survey to send out to families, I heard some of the conversation that included what you just said, which was be really specific about what it means, right? If we have mandated masking, what is the big impact of that? If we don't have mandated masking, what would be the result of that? So the attempt was made to say the big difference really is that with mandated masking, close contacts do not need to quarantine. That means they don't need to be out of school. They can attend school and school activities. So all of them can, unless they have symptoms, which is the same with anyone who's sick has to stay home. But that's the big thing with the mandated masking. If there were a move to make the masking optional, then what that means is that close contacts, whether you have symptoms or don't have symptoms, would have to quarantine out of school for 5 days. So there are exceptions to that, which is if a student is participating in pooled testing, they don't have to quarantine. If they're vaccinated, they don't have to quarantine. And if they have documentation that they actually had COVID-19 within the last 90 days, they wouldn't have to. So when I talked earlier about the fact that we have between 45 and 49% of our students vaccinated in the district, so we pick 47 in the middle of that, so we have about 53% of our students who are not vaccinated. For pooled testing, we have somewhere around 18 to 22% of our students participating in pooled testing, so say 20. So that would mean take the 53 minus 20, that still leaves a third of our students who would have to quarantine out of school for 5 days if they're in close contact. So that is the big impact if a decision were made to not have mandated masking. And we know there's been so much school, education, and family disruption related to the quarantining, because what it means is families have to look for childcare, or they're making decisions about attending their own work for that day or period of time. So there's been a lot of disruption. Students are out, teachers are trying to provide lessons, teachers are working with students when they come back. There's just a lot of disruption for families and for the child's education. So the big difference again, if we have the mandated masking, students do not need to quarantine when they're close contacts. If we have optional masking, students do need to quarantine out of school for 5 days, even students who don't have symptoms. And I know I've heard parents express concerns that asymptomatic or healthy children are home quarantining, and I understand that concern. If we don't have the masking, even those students would have to be home out of school quarantining.
Thank you. Crystal?
And does the requirement for spacing change? Is it 3 feet, or does it, if we take masking away, does it become 6?
So it would ideally be 6 all the time, no matter what, but the 3 feet is acceptable because we didn't want, the state didn't want schools not to be able to have students back in.
Okay, so if we take masks away, it's still 3 feet?
It could still be, well, yes, it could still be what we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions for Kim? Jessica?
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So I thought if a student was in close contact outside of the school, that the rules were different than if they were in close contact to somebody in the school system. So these are, you're talking about?
In the school.
Right, so
Yes.
if a child came into contact with somebody who was tested positive, in the school setting, these would be the set of rules. If they came into contact with somebody outside of the school system, negates this.
That's correct, that's correct. Now, Jessica, I'm glad you asked that question, because that reminded me too, in talking with our nurses about, what potentially would this look like. The other thing is that if you're in a classroom right now with the masking, 3 feet is it. You would not be in close contact. We don't have to at all with the masking. But it would suddenly be 6 feet radius for close contacts. And if you had a classroom situation where students were moving around, it would then become the whole class of students, unless, of course, they were participating in pool testing or were vaccinated.
Other questions for Kim? If not, certainly the intent was for board members to have the opportunity to weigh in on the items that they wish to be contained in this, to make sure that folks understood what we're asking for a question, and to make sure to respond to those questions that we had at our last meeting, and I think in discussions around that, to make sure that we try to make this as clear as we, on our end, as we can. So if there are no other questions, that will go out. Kim?
So I can send that out tomorrow.
Thank you. So folks will see that in their inboxes shortly. Mr. Childs.
How would the results look from that, how would we be able to see or verify the results to what is it like a poll where we'd be able to see this percentage, or how would we all?
Yeah, I think you'd get the same information the board would, as far as the superintendent will report back how many responses we had and what those responses were.
Thank you.
All right, moving along to item 9.3. Approval of fundraiser for Levitt Area High School Student Council and Tripp Middle School Student Council to raise monies for the Betty White Challenge to be donated to Mission Working Dogs and Community Cat Advocates. Yuri, do we have a second?
Second.
Crystal, discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Item 9.4, approval of a $30,000 grant from the Hannafin Foundation for Turner Elementary School Library. Yuri.
Second.
Crystal, discussion on this one? Jessica.
I'm curious who filled out the grant. That would be Teresa?
No.
Oh.
So, our district elementary librarian became aware of this grant, and she passed the information along to my administrative assistant, Cassandra Roy, who wrote the grant, and it was approved. And this is for the ongoing work. I think you remember that there was a $25,000 grant from the Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation. The library at Turner Elementary School is in need of renovations, and some of the work has already been done, but we did not have enough money to finish it. So I believe this piece of it will get us that much closer to the work being completed for the students and staff.
Thank you, and kudos to our fantastic grant writing staff. Other questions on this one? If not, all those in favor? Unanimous, that's outstanding. That brings us to 9.5, proposal for planning time for teachers and ed techs.
Betsy, would you like me to review it?
Please.
Okay. So you have heard me talk several times this fall, this year, about the desperate need teachers and ed techs have for additional planning time. So in working with principals as well as the TTEA leadership, we came up with some ideas that we thought might help provide our teachers and ed techs with a little bit of extra planning time for this year. Now, I put a survey out to staff as well, because I wanted to find out if they were in favor of these ideas and if they had additional ideas that they wanted us to consider. So the idea is that we would take 3 of our regularly full school student days that are already scheduled in the calendar and turn those into half days, which would mean that students would attend those days for half the day, and the second half of the day would be forced for teachers and ed techs to do their planning work that they desperately need to do. The other part of this was that December 22nd was a half day in the calendar, and it was a half day as compensation for teachers' fall conferences. If you remember, that happened to become a snow day. So we would just make that day up in June. However, our last day of school is always a half day. It doesn't make sense in my mind to have 2 half days. We can't combine them because we need to have 175 student days. So the proposal is to make December 22nd up as a full day in June, and then take the Friday before Memorial Day weekend, which is May 27, and turn that into a half day for everyone. And that makes up for that compensation for teachers for the conferences. So back to the survey that I sent to teachers. We had 153 responses, and out of those responses, 78% of them were people on the teacher's contract. So it could be teachers, it could be nurses, etc. And 22% were ed techs. 91.5% are in favor of changing the 3 regularly scheduled full school days already in this year's calendar to the half days. 92% are in favor of making May 27th the replacement day for December 22nd for the compensation for teachers and conferences. And then there were a lot of good responses about additional things that teachers and ed techs would like us to further consider to support them. And the things that came up the most included things like securing more subs, right? We don't have enough subs, so people are constantly being pulled from their prep times to cover for staff who's out, or they're being pulled from other duties also to cover for staff who are absent. And we have been having regular periods of high staff absences, right, which was not a surprise in a pandemic. So this is happening a lot, not just on occasion. So the hope was we can secure more subs and have one per building, which we have wanted to do as well. To use some or all of our staff meeting time and take a look at that, and could we use some of that for the staff meeting and a little bit of that for some planning. There were several responses that indicated that paying teachers when they have to lose prep times to cover classes, to consider that. And there were a couple of suggestions about ed techs when they have to cover some kind of compensation. There were also some suggestions that we consider a late start or an early release on Wednesdays, if not this year, going forward next year, to allow for regular planning time throughout the year. And then there were a lot of other kind of one-off. Oh, another one that had I think 5 responses was not having to use personal sick time for COVID-related things. So all of these I will take back to our principals, and we will be discussing what is feasible, what could work. Another one would be, we have March 18th is a full in-service day, and another one that got a lot of responses was, could we consider some of that time for planning time? So we will be discussing all of that. Teresa and I will also be discussing this with the TTA leadership as well. And so the board can expect that I will be back with a wrap-up on those conversations and potentially another proposal to support our teachers and ed techs.
Kim, at this time, do you need board action for these changes?
Yes, please.
So we need a motion to specifically to those 3 additional half-days as well as the other swab?
Yes, please.
So if we have a motion, then we can go into discussion on that. Do we have a motion?
I'll motion to accept the 3 half-days, changing those in the schedule calendar, and doing the December 22nd flip-flop with May. That was really technical. It sounded really good.
I
You know
think
what I meant.
we all trust that Teresa will interpret. Thank you. Do we have a second for that? Yuri, and discussion. Yes.
I just want to verify, so the half days, like those count as a full day for the 175 days, correct? Cool.
So this keeps us, and just to further clarify that, so we're fine as far as student days are concerned. This is more around trying to figure out some way to address some of the planning time and some of the other factors that we're seeing. But it does not negatively impact our total number of student instructional days.
That is correct. We will have the 175 student days still, and it will also allow for some additional planning time for teachers and techs.
Thank you. Yuri?
I would certainly be in support of the flip-flop. I have concerns about the additional half-days. I think we've spent quite a bit of time over the last 6 months talking about how important it is to maximize the student days and the student in front of teacher time, and this adds 3 more half-days that we don't do that.
Other comments on this? Seeing none? Oh, Jessica, sorry.
I would really, I don't know if we can split this into 2 different votes because of that reason, but I'm concerned, especially the February 3rd date, is really coming up close for parents who would need to change schedules again.
So a couple options, as far as if we wanted to make it 2 votes, you could either amend the original motion, or we can put the original motion to a vote and simply vote against it, and if it fails, we can come back and do a different sort of option.
Are you looking at me to make that choice, or Crystal?
So just from a process standpoint, if somebody's looking to see an action that's different from, the original motion was for the entirety of the proposal, basically. So if somebody wanted something that was not that, your 2 options are either to vote down the original motion or to offer up an amendment to that would change it.
So I would offer up an amendment that we vote for the December 22nd day to become a full day in June and use the half-day makeup on May 27th as 1 vote, and the 3 additional half-days to be a 2nd vote.
Teresa, are you clear on what the amendment is? So you're amending to take that up separately, basically, so that you're amending that.
I think when Jessica, you said that it would be the December date and then the date in June becomes a full date?
Is that what I read correctly on here?
Yeah. Okay. I'll put my glasses on so I can see it.
Second to last paragraph.
Kim, is that clear what Jessica's?
Yes, what I think I understand is that Jessica is making a motion that we would consider this proposal that I put before the board as 2 separate votes. 1 vote would be to approve replacing December 22nd, which was a half-day for compensation for conferences, and turn into a snow day. That day would become a full day in June, and then we would have May 27th as a half-day. So that would be 1 motion. And then what I think I understand is there would be a second motion, which would be to approve the 3 half days in the schedule.
So as always, Kim has explained things way better than I was trying to fumble through it there. So really the amendment that Jessica has offered up is to take these as 2 separate things. Do we have a second for the amendment? Because we need to deal with the amendment first.
Well, kind of, I think. Can I ask, can we, because I recognize how important this is to staff to have planning time. Can we maybe not do February the 3rd, but the other 2, March 30th and May 3rd? And like, are we But I think that's like.
And there's always the option of simply withdrawing your initial motion
I
and
withdraw my original motion.
does the second also withdraw? So that seems like it's a little cleaner than, anyways. So right now we have a proposal that Superintendent Brandt has presented to us with the half days as well as the combination day, June and May. And I'm with Teresa. I probably should throw some glasses on here so I can actually read it a little bit better. Does a board member have a motion in mind that they would prefer to start attacking this?
Starting with the December.
Starting with whatever you want to make for a motion. It sounded like we were getting tangled up in having everything together there.
I would make a motion that December 22nd is a half day, that we do that swap with the day in June and the day before Memorial Day, as spelled out in paragraph 3.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second on, as spelled out in paragraph 3. I'm going to go with that wording. Discussion on that. Joanne?
Well, I don't know if it's discussion on that or not. Are we eliminating Kim's proposal and going with something different? We didn't even really vote on this one. I really have no problem with this one, being in a school every day and knowing what's happening. And it's a dream to think you're going to get more subs. I would love it, but I don't see it happening. I don't see the needs changing. And I really don't even feel like if you increase the pay, you're going to get more subs. There's just no interest. I kind of like what's here and not playing around with it myself.
Other comments? Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? Those opposed? Motion carries. Further discussion on any of the remainder of the proposal? Or was that it? I was confused with the initial part.
We were just splitting it, right? Into two separate parts. Yeah.
So the motion that Yuri made
Was for the bottom.
was for that. If there's desire to make a separate motion on the other.
I will make a separate motion to accept March 30th and May 3rd as half days. To change to our current calendar.
Do we have a second on that? Discussion on this one.
I'm wondering, so that they still get their their 3 days, if we could do a later February date, giving parents more of a warning, I guess, with that, or if they would consider an April date. I know we have April vacation.
Kim, can you speak to the
Would
date
it be helpful for you
component
to
of
see
it?
copies of the calendar?
Yes. So we have a motion at this point that is for the March 30th and the May 3rd. Is that correct? We had a motion and a second on that. Crystal and Jessica. So discussion around that motion. Kim.
Betsy, I just want to say one more time that the planning time is desperately needed. And I appreciate the board considering all of this. It is something that we really need. Everyone's aware of not wanting to do any more disruption for student days as well. I am concerned about our teachers and ed techs not having enough planning time.
additional discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? One opposed, the motion passes.
Can I just get clarity on the motion? Is it to have 2 half-days, March 30th and May 3rd?
The motion was specifically for March 30th and May 3rd.
And Yuri and Joanne were opposed?
I believe so,
I think
yes.
there were 2 opposed on that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Kim, for bringing a proposal to us and for continuing to work to address conditions that staff is sharing pretty clearly are continue to be very challenging for everyone. We'll look forward to hearing the outcome of those other conversations around some of the other suggestions that were made in the course of that survey work. Item 9.6, approval of November operating and expenditure reports. Do we have a motion for that? Yuri, do we have a second?
Second.
Crystal, discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. Our remaining items are executive sessions, one to discuss compensation of officials, appointees, employees, pursuant to 1 MRSA, and one to discuss continued discussion on the superintendent of schools evaluation pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056D, and any actions as warranted on those, unless there are any other items of business that anyone feels we need to take up. If not, I would entertain a motion for item 9.7, executive session. Yuri, do we have a second?
Sure.
Crystal, all those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. We will